Good day, Internet. This is Chavez and Valco, the key to your immigration solutions. I'm Senior Associate Ben Hamilton. You know, when you see me, we're here to talk about all things employment-based immigration. And today we have the big news. Officially, the H-1B lottery is done for fiscal year 2023. I know for a lot of you, this is bad news. You were waiting to see if maybe you'd be selected in a second or third round. Unfortunately, this year they are done. Kind of want to review some of the facts, right? First, last year they had to do 3 lotteries. This year they only did 1. What gives? Well, last year USCIS only selected 87.5 thousand registrations to fill 85,000 slots. Basically, they overselected by 3% to compensate for their denial rate. Of course, that completely ignored the glaring issue of duplicate registrations, right? Which we know right now is rampant and destroying the system. And USCIS today has done nothing about it. Anyway, USCIS completely ignored that fact, meaning you had people that were, let's say, getting, registering 20 times, being selected 10, and then applying once, right? So that means you had 9 selections not being responded to. So they had to go to a second round that was fairly large, second round, and then they had to go to even to a third round because naturally with each round, the number of people actually applying that have been selected keeps going down, right? It went from like 60% down to like below 30%, right? In terms of, if I'm selecting 20,000 people, only 20% are actually submitting petitions. Like the numbers keep going down. I'm kind of convinced they never actually got to 85. What happened is, they do the lottery, then you have 90 days, and they do another lottery, you have another 90 days. Well, it got to March, right? March of this year, meaning they're now having to set up the system to start accepting the new registrations for this year. I kind of think they never got to 85, but the system can't handle 2 cap seasons going on at once, so they just shut it down. They got to March of this year and they're just like, no, done. Like, we cannot have 2. We just need to shut it down. Maybe we're still a few thousand short. But hey, who's going to know about it? We got to move on. Again, we don't know this. They haven't released any data on fiscal year 2022 or fiscal year 2023. All we know are the number of registrations and the number of selections. That is it. So coming into this year, first off, registrations spiked dramatically, right? I mean, we went from, 270-ish thousand now up to over 480,000. A lot of people are like, well, it's a strong economy, strong job market. Sorry, calling BS, right? I think the majority of the growth is being pushed by duplicate registrations. People realizing, A, you can do this, and B, the government's not doing anything about it, right? So that means just every year on year, you're going to see the H-1B numbers just exploding. Remember, pre-registration, the highest number of applications ever received was 230,000. Now, back in those days, you had to pay an attorney, pay all the filing fees, and submit the full application to have your name in the lottery. So there was a higher, higher barrier to entry. Obviously, now the barrier to entry being $10, more people are going to, of course, apply. But is it really going to go from 230 to almost 500,000? I don't think so. I think it's going to go from 230 to like 300,000, right? Because again, you still have to have an employer who's willing to offer you a job in order to submit this. So going into this year, registrations went way up. And obviously, it's our belief that that was driven in large part by an increase in registrations, right? So the percentage of cases that were duplicates went up compared to last year, right? So we're thinking, wow, USCIS is either going to have to select a whole lot of people or have multiple rounds again. Well, this year they came out of the gate and they selected, I think it was 127,000, right? So they way over selected. They nearly selected the same amount they selected total last year, right? So remember, last year there was less registrations and it took them 130,000 selections to get there. This year there's way more registrations and they selected 127. So you're like, it still seems like the numbers don't make sense, right? It still seems like that's an under selection, right? So if I'm selecting slightly less than I did last year, but my registrations have gone up, meaning my duplicate numbers also probably gone up, I'm probably going to need to increase. So we were fairly convinced there was going to be a second lottery this year. Just looking at the numbers, right? That again, we're kind of guesstimating here because USCIS hasn't released any information to say, well, based on what we saw last year, that means this year there's probably going to be a second lottery. Well, there wasn't. Why? Part of it can just be odds, right? I mean, look, even if there's 480,000 registrations and a lot of them are duplicates, you have at least, probably 300,000 are fairly legitimate, right? And obviously, if you're selecting 127, you have good odds that most of the ones you're selecting are legitimate, and you could just be pure luck, right? That they actually, over-selected, but just so happened they selected the majority. Now you can say, well, maybe they were like putting their thumb on a scale and there were some factors they considered. We don't know that. Technically, they're not supposed to. It's supposed to be a straight lottery. So they're not supposed to be able to say, oh, well, this employer's brand new. Oh, this employer has no revenue. They're not supposed to do that. Plus, you're saying, well, why are we allowing duplicate registrations? Why aren't they just tossing them? Well, because you got to remember, the registrations are done by the employers, right? So if you have one person being registered 20 times, they're being registered by 20 different employers, right? And each registration pertains to the employer. So if you say, well, in round one, this guy got selected, why don't they just get rid of the rest of his registrations? There is some sense to that, but you have to remember they're employer-based. So if you get rid of the rest of the registrations, you're not hurting the individual, you're hurting the employers who maybe wanted to employ that person. So since it's all employer-based and not individual-based, that's why they allow for duplicate registrations. That's why they don't get rid of duplicate registrations if someone was maybe selected in a prior round. Again, if they did that, we don't know. I have a feeling that this year we probably also saw an increase in duplicate petitions, meaning someone gets selected, someone registers 20 times, gets selected 10. We're saying, oh, last year they would have just submitted one application, one petition. Part because it's expensive, right? You have to pay $460 filing fee, $500 anti-fraud fee, at least a $750 acquia fee, plus any legal fees. It's really expensive to submit multiple petitions. And of course, the employer is supposed to pay for all that. But come on, we've seen all of the Twitters and the Telegrams and whatnot, where people are essentially offering registrations for sale, which of course is illegal. But anyway, I have a feeling that if we finally get numbers from USCIS, we're probably going to see we're going to see a lot more duplicate petitions than maybe we expected. So when I say that, obviously each petition is coming from a different employer, but the beneficiary is the same, right? We're going to say, oh, this person was named in 3 different H-1B petitions. Oh, this person was named in 2 different. To me, that is definitely odd, and I think rare. Again, there's plenty of people that can legitimately be registered 2 or 3 times, right? I mean, there's plenty of those that are legitimate. We've seen them in our own firm. It's the question of the person's being registered 10, 15, 20 times, which we know is happening. That's like, no, there's just no way, right? People are setting up a series of essentially shell companies to register someone as much as they can. And again, it seems like in the past, no matter how many times you were selected, you only submitted 1 petition. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that that's gone up. And again, USCIS has done nothing. They did have a rule on the books that was going to make some tweaks and changes to the H-1B program, to F1 OPT and cap gap. That rule was set to be published in May of this year. They kicked that back to May of next year. So as it currently stands, we don't foresee there being any changes to this system before next cap season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see registrations surpass 600,000, to be honest with you. Why not? Because again, this rule is not going to be published, and then it has to go through the notice and comment period, and maybe it'll be in place for fiscal year 2025. But fiscal year 2024 is probably going to be an even worse nightmare. Now, what are some of the numbers that we want to see, right? I mean, of course, we want to know for the fiscal years 2022 and 2023, how many cases how many duplicate registrations were there, right? We don't actually know, especially those with, I would say, more than 3 registrations, right? Like, what is the percentage of cases of that involve an individual being registered more than 3 times? Also, how prevalent are duplicate petitions? Again, having a duplicate registration is not necessarily fraudulent if you legitimately have multiple job offers from different employers. Duplicate petitions is not also necessarily fraudulent if you have legitimate job offers from different employers. Again, a lot of this has to do with shell companies, and they're all like, it's, hey, I'm registered 20 times by 20 different companies, but it's really only one job offer. That would be fraudulent. When you're looking at the duplicate petitions, right, we obviously want to know, well, is there a correlation between the duplicate petitions and the employer? Like, does the employer, were they new? Because on the I-129, you have to put the year they're incorporated, the gross revenue, and the number of employees. So when it comes to duplicate registrations, are we seeing a higher percentage of cases of employers that are brand new, have no income, and no employees? The third thing, obviously, is USCIS challenging those cases, right? I mean, are they literally able to cross-reference and say, "Oh, we see that this beneficiary has been filed for multiple times. This petitioner is a new company. We suspect this is fraudulent." So, they send a request for evidence, basically challenging the employer to show that they have the H-1B specialty occupation actually available. Do they have contracts and blah blah blah? Can they prove? Because again, I mean, we've done plenty of cases for startups, right, that had no revenue, but then we got an RFE, and then we were able to prove that, oh no, they've gotten all this VC funding, like $5 million in VC funding. They have their project roadmap, right, and so they had the funds available and the work available to support the beneficiary for at least 3 years. Those RFEs have always happened, right? But are they doing them now? Because those were, pre the IT Serve Alliance settlement and were targeted at the sort of outsourcers. So I'm wondering if they're still challenging those. Fourth, I also want to know, is USCIS seeing a spike in change of employer applications, right? So what we could see happening here is obviously people register a bunch of times. Let's say they register 20 times, but 1 or 2 of those maybe are like fully legitimate, right? And then the other 18 are all just, fraudulent. Well, let's say one of the fraudulent ones gets selected, all right? So they go to that person that set it up and say, hey, we'll pay you. Let's see if we can get this approved. And then say it gets approved, right? Well, they don't really actually want to work for that person, right? It's all a game. They really want to work for one of those 2 legitimate employers. So what do, right? They get the approval, and then they immediately file a change of employer. Like, it hasn't even activated yet, right? Because it's not October 1st. So they immediately file a change of employer. My question is USCIS seeing a spike of change of employer cases being filed before 10/1, right? So all these people are getting approved in June and July, and then immediately filing changes of employer effective, 10/2. And then are they seeing a spike of that? And B, are they challenging it, right? Where they're looking back and being like, well, we want to see evidence that it was a legitimate job offer, that this employer had worked for you, that I don't know, that you worked for them or were going to work for them. I mean, technically it doesn't take effect until 10/1. But is USCI, are they challenging this, right? Because so far it seems like they're really doing nothing. The only thing they did this year is they added an attestation to the registration that just said, I promise I'm not, doing bad things. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're out there committing fraud, I don't think you really care about an attestation. I mean, at the end of the day, what we know is this system is a complete mess. USCIS knew it was going to be a complete mess. They were called out multiple times in the notice and comment period before they implemented it. And they kind of just brushed all those criticisms off. They just said, no, don't worry about it. It's not going to be that big of a problem. Of course it is, right? When you've exploded up to 480,000 registrations, USCIS is having to select almost 130,000 people to fill 85,000 slots. Something's got to give. In part because I feel like the people that are being damaged the most here are the people who are what we call the best and the brightest, right? If you have a guy with a PhD, research scientist, well, maybe that's not the best example because they'd probably be cap exempt. but you have that person who like went to the top tier US school, has a really strong, a job offer from like a top tier company, right? They're more likely, I think, to probably just, hey, I'm doing things the right way, right? I'm going to register one time with this one. While some other guy, right, probably from another country, doesn't even have a US degree, right, is out there registering 30 times. And then he's the one getting selected and coming in, while the guy, the super highly educated guy with the prestigious US job is not. And it's like, what are we doing here? Right? How do we not have a system that is geared towards, favoring the best and the brightest? Again, Trump administration wanted to change it to a wage-based preference. I've seen other proposals to change it to a education-based preference. So, for example, people with a U.S. master's degree in a STEM field would kind of go first, right? And then U.S. master's degrees, and then I think it was wage level 4, and then U.S. bachelor's in a STEM field, then U.S. bachelor's, and wage level 3. So if you have like a foreign degree, you're kind of at the bottom of the list unless you were wage level 4, right? Because obviously wage level 4 means you may not have a U.S. degree, but you've accumulated sufficient experience, expertise, or whatever to garner a wage level 4. Now push you up. I don't know. At this point, I think almost any of those proposals are almost better than the current system, right? Again, that's just completely rife with fraud. An agency that seems not really willing to do a whole lot about it, right? Or at least they're taking forever to do anything about it. And again, we don't know what this rule is going to be. Maybe we wait till May of next year, it comes out, and it's like nothing. Like it's just some minor tweaks and changes that don't really do anything. We don't know. So at the end of the day, the H-1B. Oh, let's talk a little bit about how the system actually works, right? So employers create my USCIS accounts. They link them with the attorney, right? So either the employer or the attorney is the one going in and doing the registration. So for example, what happened with us is, I think what happened is some point Friday, probably Friday evening, Friday night, someone went in and updated something in our system. So Saturday morning, we just get an email that says there's been a change to your account. Of course, we don't know what case it is. So we have to log in, go through each case one by one to see what the change has been. And that's when we started to notice, some of our cases is converted to not selected. Right? Because in previous years, right, when you submit your case, your status shows submitted. And then when they run a lottery, if you're selected, it changes to selected. And if you're not selected, it just stays as submitted, right? It just stays as submitted because they might do another lottery. And so last year, it didn't change to not selected until they were done, which was in February. So the second we started seeing stuff change to not selected, we're like, they only do that when they're done. They don't like change some to submitted and some to selected at the same time. It's never happened to date. But at the time, Saturday morning, for us, it was only like 20% of cases had changed to not selected. So we're like, I don't know, like either they're doing this in waves or maybe there's a second lottery. I don't know. So throughout the day, I'd routinely check in and see, okay, now it's gone up to 33%. Okay, now it's gone up to 50%, not selected. And then, of course, because there was changes throughout the day on Saturday, Sunday morning, we get the email, there's been changes to your account. Which cases, obviously you don't know. You have to go in and look. But of course, I'd been following it throughout the day and kind of knew. I don't think it was until Sunday evening. I go back and check, but I think it was Sunday evening when I was finally like, 100% of our cases have now changed to not selected. Like it looks like this is done. The other thing too is, looking on social media at other attorneys were all reporting the same thing, right? That they had seen updates. They were all not selected. Nobody had seen selected. The crazy thing is by kind of like Sunday night, Monday morning, we kind of knew. They didn't announce it until Tuesday. Like, what would have been, 10 o'clock for us here in Dallas, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time? It's like, seriously? First off, you can't update everything at once. And B, like, if you knew you were going to be doing updates over the weekend, why didn't they announce it on Friday? Just rip the Band-Aid off. Let us know, right? Rather than drag it out, we're just sitting here on pins and needles, people waiting to see, if they're going to have a future in the United States over the weekend, slowly getting updates, wondering, and having to wait all the way until Tuesday to get an answer. It's like, seriously, like, are you deliberately trying to make people suffer? If you know they're going to be doing the updates starting like Friday evening through the weekend, just issue the press release on Friday. Let us know. And that way, we can go about our lives and go about our weekend and not be sitting here checking every 5 seconds to find out. But again, this is the way this agency currently works. Now, I know a lot of people are going to yell at the agency and say they're incompetent. I think there is a level of incompetence. The other thing you have to remember is USCIS is a self-funded agency. They're funded through the filing fees that they receive. So when it comes to their technology, they're essentially self-funding. Congress really hasn't appropriated any money for it. So a lot of this comes back to who could fix all of these problems overnight in terms of just redesigning the cap to maybe not be a cap, to be a preference system, to allocating more money to USCIS so that they can really build out an online system that works, right? That allows for filing of I-129s online, filing of I-140s online, all the payment of the fees online, uploading of all the documents. Wouldn't it be amazing just to, like, you get an update to your account, the RFE is just posted there, you can go in and see the RFE immediately, and then respond to it by just putting together your response and then uploading it. Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. Anyway, Congress. It's Congress. Congress has the authority to make these changes overnight. If USCIS wants to make a change, they have to get the money, which they don't have, or they have to go through a rulemaking process, which takes forever, right? Well, Congress doesn't have to go through the rulemaking progress. They can just write a law and pass it that makes these changes, or appropriates money to USCIS for building out their software or increasing their staffing. So if at the end of the day, I know it's easy to yell at the agency. I love to yell at the agency, but at the end of the day, if you really want to yell at kind of the people responsible for the current situation, it's Congress. They haven't really done anything related to immigration in years, really decades. I mean, most of our laws come from the 1990s at this point. And they haven't updated anything. So obviously, you can always encourage people to write to the congressmen and senators on these issues to try to keep it in the forefront, right, as we're coming into an election season. I mean, right now, people have been their focus has been taken away to other issues like, abortion's a big issue now because of the Dobbs decision. Also, when you look at immigration, a lot of it's being driven by the right-wing media and looking at like asylum and border stuff, and a lot of the employment-based stuff's being ignored. Right. So we really have to try to keep pushing these issues and keeping them out there so that they're not essentially forgotten. But okay, rant over. Main takeaway. The lottery for this year is done. If you were selected, great. If you weren't selected, I'm sorry. Right. Next year, I don't think there's going to be any changes. But hey, look, if you're one of the people that wasn't selected and you're looking for, hey, where do I go from here? Obviously, reach out to us, set up a consultation. You can reach out to us through this social media. You can go to our website where you can schedule a consultation if you want to talk about options, as going back to F1, day one CPT, J1, right? H-1B cap exempt. Are you from a country that has a treaty for an e-visa? The entrepreneurial parole rule. There's a bazillion options out there. Maybe there's one that works for you, even if it's like a short-term fix, right? Gets you through the next year. But let us know. As always, download our app, Lawpilot Guardian. It's available for Android and iOS. And thank you for tuning in to these updates. And we will see you next time. Thank you.